Top 5 actors James Cagney hated most. Behind the electrifying performances and rapid-fire delivery that made him a Hollywood legend, James Cagney harbored judgments as explosive as any gangster he portrayed on screen. The Academy Award winner who revolutionized screen intensity maintained a carefully cultivated public image of professionalism while privately nursing animosities that shaped his legendary career. Jimmy kept score like nobody else in Hollywood, revealed a longtime Warner Brothers crew member. He had an elephant's memory for slights, both professional and personal, and he never forgot when someone crossed him. What makes these revelations so fascinating isn't just their content, but how completely Cagney concealed these feelings during his 5-decade career. Known for his punctuality, preparation, and no-nonsense approach to filmmaking, he rarely allowed personal conflicts to visibly affect his performances. Yet these private resentments influenced his choice of roles, collaborators, and ultimately the trajectory of American cinema itself. Prepare yourself for the unvarnished reality behind some of Hollywood's most enduring performances. Feuds so intense they remained hidden in plain sight across iconic films that millions have watched without ever suspecting the genuine contempt simmering beneath Cagney's trademark intensity. 1. Edward G. Robinson, the rival who became an obsession. The most intense and consequential of James Cagney's professional animosities was reserved for Edward G. Robinson, a rivalry so fierce it shaped the trajectory of gangster films and ultimately both men's careers. This wasn't just professional competition, explained a casting director from Warner Bros.' golden era. This was existential. Two compact, intense actors fighting for the same territory in a studio system that only had room for one king of the gangster picture. Their conflict originated when both actors rose to prominence at Warner Bros. Within months of each other. Cagney with The Public Enemy, 1931, and Robinson with Little Caesar, 1931. Studio head Jack Warner, recognizing the commercial potential of their rivalry, deliberately played them against each other, promising the same roles to both actors and leaking unflattering comparisons to the press. The animosity crystallized during pre-production for Smart Money, 1931, originally designed as a star vehicle for Robinson. When Warner Brothers insisted on adding the newly popular Cagney in a supporting role, Robinson allegedly demanded script changes to ensure his character dominated every scene they shared. The result? Cagney appears in the first third of the film before his character mysteriously disappears, the product of behind-the-scenes maneuvering that Cagney never forgot. Jimmy viewed it as a deliberate sabotage of his breakthrough moment, revealed a script supervisor. He told friends, "Eddie made sure I got pushed out of that picture, so I made sure to push him out of Warner Bros." True to his word, as Cagney's star rose, he used his growing influence to reject any project where Robinson might receive equal billing. When both were considered for Angels with Dirty Faces, 1938, Cagney allegedly told director Michael Curtis, "It's him or me, and I'm the one putting butts in seats." Robinson was quietly dropped from consideration. The rivalry took a personal turn when Robinson, a noted art collector and intellectual, made dismissive remarks about Cagney's working-class background and limited formal education. According to a mutual friend, when Robinson described Cagney as a talented performer who lacks cultural refinement, word got back to Cagney, who responded, "I'd rather be authentic than pretentious. At least my tough guy isn't an act." This cutting remark referenced Hollywood's open secret. Robinson, unlike Cagney, had never known street life and had created his gangster persona entirely through observation rather than experience. For Cagney, who had grown up in New York's rough neighborhoods, this theatrical toughness represented everything he considered inauthentic about Robinson's approach to acting. Their mutual animosity ultimately benefited audiences as both men pushed themselves to more nuanced performances to outshine the other. As a Warner Brothers executive noted, their hatred made them both better actors. Each new Robinson picture made Cagney work harder on his next role, and vice versa. The final chapter in their rivalry came when both were questioned during the Hollywood blacklist era. Robinson, facing intense scrutiny, cooperated with investigators. Cagney, though equally anti-communist, refused to name names or participate in what he considered government overreach. When Robinson's career suffered while Cagney's continued, Cagney reportedly remarked to a friend, "Eddie played tough guys for decades but couldn't stand up when it actually mattered." This ultimate contrast between Robinson's screen toughness and perceived real-life compromise cemented Cagney's lifelong disdain for the rival who had once threatened his territory, but ultimately, in Cagney's view, failed the test of true character when it mattered most. 2. Humphrey Bogart. From bitter rival to uneasy respect, James Cagney's complicated relationship with Humphrey Bogart evolved from outright animosity to grudging respect, a transformation that speaks volumes about both men's characters and Cagney's capacity for both intense hatred and professional reassessment. Jimmy and Bogey started as enemies and ended as something more complex. Not friends exactly, but mutual members of a very exclusive club, explained a director who worked with both actors. They were the only two who truly understood what the other had survived at Warner Bros. Their conflict originated during their early years at the studio when Bogart, struggling in supporting roles, was frequently cast as the gangster killed by Cagney's character, a professional humiliation that bred resentment. The tension exploded on the set of Angels with Dirty Faces, 1938, when Bogart, frustrated by his secondary status, allegedly arrived unprepared for a pivotal scene, prompting Cagney to confront him between takes. Jimmy backed Bogey against a wall and said, "Some of us take this job seriously. Either learn your lines or find another profession," recalled a crew member. Bogey was furious, but also embarrassed because he knew Jimmy was right. What transformed their relationship was Bogart's breakthrough in The Petrified Forest and subsequent rise to stardom. Cagney, who had previously dismissed Bogart as a second-rate heavy who drinks away his potential, began viewing him differently as Bogart developed his own distinctive screen persona. The turning point came during the Warner Brothers contract battles of the early 1940s, when both actors fought the studio's punishing suspension policies. Though they pursued their grievances separately, Cagney, who successfully broke free from Warner Brothers, was impressed by Bogart's similar stand against studio control. Jimmy respected anyone who wouldn't be pushed around, noted a longtime associate. When Bogey finally stood up to the studio, Jimmy told friends, "Maybe I underestimated him. He's got some spine after all." Their mutual animosity transformed into professional respect after both had established independent control over their careers. When they crossed paths at industry events in the 1950s, witnesses described their interaction as wary but cordial, two veterans who had survived the same war and emerged with battle scars and war stories that only the other could fully appreciate. The final chapter in their relationship came when Bogart was dying of cancer in 1957. According to multiple sources, Cagney, who rarely made such gestures, called Bogart in his final weeks. No record exists of their conversation, but Cagney later told a friend, "We had our differences, but he died with more dignity than most live with. You have to respect that." This evolution from bitter rivalry to complicated respect reveals a dimension of Cagney rarely captured in biographies: his capacity to reassess long-held animosities when evidence of genuine character emerged. But while Cagney's feelings toward Bogart evolved, his next Hollywood hatred remained unchangingly intense until the end. 3. Jack Warner. The studio boss Cagney never forgave. No account of James Cagney's professional animosities would be complete without examining his legendary hatred for Jack Warner, a conflict so bitter it went beyond professional disagreement to something approaching personal vendetta from both sides. "This wasn't just about money or creative control," explained a Warner Brothers executive from the era. "This was about dignity." Jimmy believed Jack Warner treated actors like chattel rather than artists, and he made it his mission to prove Warner couldn't break him. Their conflict began almost immediately after Cagney's breakthrough in The Public Enemy, 1931. Despite the film's massive success, Warner kept Cagney on his original low-paying contract while demanding an increasingly grueling production schedule. When Cagney protested, Warner allegedly responded, "You should thank me for taking you off the streets. There are thousands of actors who would kill for your job." This dismissive attitude, treating actors as replaceable commodities rather than skilled professionals, ignited a resentment in Cagney that would fuel decades of conflict. The situation deteriorated further when Warner began typecasting Cagney exclusively in gangster roles, despite the actor's desire to demonstrate his range. Jimmy was a trained dancer, a gifted comedian, and had serious dramatic ambitions, noted a director who worked with Cagney. But Jack saw him as one thing: the tough guy who sold tickets. It was professionally suffocating. The breaking point came in 1935 when Warner suspended Cagney for demanding better conditions and script approval. Defying conventional wisdom that no actor could survive fighting a major studio, Cagney walked away and signed with Grand National Pictures, an unprecedented act of rebellion that Warner took as personal betrayal. Although financial realities eventually brought Cagney back to Warner Brothers, the relationship had fundamentally changed. Their interactions became a cold war of contractual maneuvers, with Cagney meticulously counting dialogue lines to ensure he wasn't being shortchanged, and Warner finding creative ways to extend Cagney's obligations to the studio. They couldn't even be in the same room by the 1940s, revealed a studio publicist. Promotional events had to be scheduled so they wouldn't cross paths. The hatred was that intense. What made their animosity historically significant was how it helped reshape Hollywood's power structure. Cagney's successful legal battles against Warner Brothers established precedents that gave actors more control and eventually contributed to the decline of the studio system itself. In many ways, Jack Warner represented everything Cagney found objectionable about Hollywood, prioritizing commerce over art, power over dignity, and control over creativity. The final insult came years after Cagney had won his freedom. When Jack Warner published his autobiography, he devoted considerable space to portraying Cagney as difficult, ungrateful, and politically suspect. Cagney's response was characteristically blunt. Jack Warner would have made a great slave owner in the Old South. He might have been more successful in that business than he was in motion pictures. Until his death, Cagney maintained that his greatest professional achievement wasn't any particular film, but surviving and ultimately defeating the Warner Brothers machine while maintaining his artistic integrity, a victory he measured largely by the frustrated fury it caused Jack Warner himself. 4. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood versus the working class hero. Behind Hollywood's glamorous facade lurked a surprising animosity between two of its biggest stars. James Cagney's intense dislike of Clark Gable, a conflict rooted not in professional rivalry, but in what Cagney perceived as fundamental dishonesty about Gable's carefully constructed public image. Jimmy couldn't stand fakery of any kind, explained an actor who worked with both men, and he viewed Gable's entire persona as manufactured, the self-proclaimed working man who actually had valets dress him and who knew nothing about the real working class despite claiming to represent it. Their mutual antipathy began at an MGM function in the mid-1930s, when Gable, already crowned the King of Hollywood, was holding court with reporters about his humble Pennsylvania origins and understanding of ordinary Americans. According to witnesses, Cagney, who had actually grown up in New York poverty, listened silently before commenting within Gable's hearing, "Amazing how some people can remember childhoods they never had." This cutting remark referenced Hollywood's open secret. Much of Gable's blue-collar backstory had been enhanced or entirely created by MGM publicity, while Cagney's authentic working-class background and genuine labor sympathies were downplayed by Warner Brothers as potentially controversial. For Cagney, this contrast represented everything he found hollow about Hollywood's star system. Jimmy believed in authenticity above all else, noted a longtime associate. When he heard Gable tell reporters he understood the working man's plight while wearing a suit that cost more than a factory worker made in a year, it triggered something visceral in him. Their conflict intensified during World War II when Gable enlisted after his wife Carol Lombard's death, serving with the Army Air Forces making promotional films. Cagney, who had genuine health issues preventing service, found himself unfavorably compared to Gable's patriotic example, a comparison made more galling because Cagney knew Gable's service had been carefully arranged by MGM to involve minimum risk and maximum publicity. Jimmy was doing bond drives and USO shows despite serious health problems, revealed a friend from that period. Meanwhile, Gable was being treated like a returning hero for what was essentially a publicity tour with a uniform. It confirmed everything Jimmy already believed about Hollywood's preference for appealing fiction over messy reality. What transformed professional disdain into personal animosity was an incident at the 1943 Academy Awards, where Cagney won Best Actor for Yankee Doodle Dandy. According to multiple sources, Gable, presenting another award, made a backstage remark about Cagney's height that was overheard by Cagney himself. Cagney's response was characteristically direct. "At least I stand tall without a studio publicity department adding inches." This reference to MGM's notorious practice of exaggerating Gable's height, he was shorter than his officially listed 6 feet 1 inch, struck at the heart of what Cagney considered Gable's fundamental fraudulence. From that point forward, Cagney refused all social invitations where Gable would be present and declined to participate in any industry events requiring them to interact. Their mutual animosity had lasting consequences, as several potential film projects that might have paired these iconic actors were abandoned due to their refusal to work together. When Gable died in 1960, Cagney was conspicuously absent from both the funeral and the industry tributes, a final statement about a colleague he had never considered authentic enough to be worthy of his respect. 5. James Stewart, the political divide that ended a friendship. Perhaps the most personally painful of James James Cagney's Hollywood animosities involved Jimmy Stewart, a relationship that began as genuine friendship before deteriorating into bitter estrangement over political differences that reflected America's own deepening cultural divisions. This wasn't just professional rivalry, this was heartbreak, explained a mutual friend of both actors. They genuinely liked each other until politics made that impossible. Their split mirrored what was happening across America during the Red Scare. Their friendship originated in the late 1930s when both were rising stars chafing under restrictive studio contracts. Despite representing different screen personas, Stewart's folksy Americana contrasting with Cagney's urban intensity, they bonded over shared values of professionalism, punctuality, and a no-nonsense approach to their craft. They used to meet for lunch regularly, recalled a director who worked with both. Two actors who showed up prepared, hit their marks, and didn't believe in multiple takes. They respected each other's work ethic enormously. This professional respect deepened after Stewart's distinguished military service in World War II, which Cagney, unable to serve himself due to health issues, greatly admired. According to friends, Cagney considered Stewart what a Hollywood man should be, someone who puts citizenship above celebrity when it matters. The breaking point came during the Hollywood blacklist era of the late 1940s and early 1950s. Stewart, whose political views had shifted sharply rightward after the war, became an outspoken supporter of HUAC investigations and industry blacklisting. Cagney, while staunchly anti-communist himself, viewed the investigations as governmental overreach and the blacklist as a betrayal of American principles. Their final confrontation occurred at a Screen Actors Guild meeting where Stewart supported measures to require loyalty oaths from Guild members. According to witnesses, Cagney, normally controlled in professional settings, became uncharacteristically emotional, telling Stewart, "I fought communists in our unions when you were still in college, Jimmy, but what you're supporting now isn't Americanism. It's fear-mongering that uses patriotism as cover for cowardice." Stewart's response was equally pointed. There's a difference between playing tough and being tough on the real enemies of this country. This reference to Cagney's screen persona as somehow less authentic than Stewart's military experience struck at a particularly sensitive point for Cagney, who had long resented implications that his own patriotism was less valuable because health issues had prevented his service. From that day forward, their friendship was irreparably damaged. Despite multiple industry functions where they were both present, contemporaries noted they went to extraordinary lengths to avoid direct interaction, a painful estrangement from a friendship both had once valued. What made this conflict particularly poignant was how it reflected larger currents in American society, the way Cold War tensions transformed political disagreements into questions of fundamental loyalty and character. Two men who had genuinely respected each other found themselves on opposite sides of a divide that made reconciliation seem like betrayal of deeply held principles. Near the end of his life, when asked about Stewart, Cagney offered a response that encapsulated both his lingering pain and his characteristic directness. "Jimmy Stewart is a fine actor and was a genuine war hero. We just couldn't agree on what we were supposed to be fighting for." The legacy of Cagney's Hollywood feuds. As we've explored these 5 intense animosities that shaped James Cagney's remarkable career, a more nuanced portrait emerges of the man behind the explosive screen presence, a complex individual whose conflicts weren't merely personal but reflected deeper principles about authenticity, integrity, and professional responsibility. What makes Cagney's hidden hatreds particularly revealing isn't just their intensity, but what they tell us about his character. His animosity toward Edward G. Robinson stemmed from professional rivalry, but deepened over questions of authentic versus performed toughness. His conflicts with Jack Warner represented not just contract disputes, but fundamental disagreements about an actor's dignity and creative autonomy. His political break with Jimmy Stewart reflected not mere partisan disagreement, but differing conceptions of how patriotism should manifest in challenging times. Throughout these conflicts, a consistent thread emerges: Cagney's uncompromising insistence on authenticity. Whether rejecting Clark Gable's manufactured persona or evolving from hatred to respect for Humphrey Bogart based on evidence of genuine character, Cagney approached his professional relationships with the same intensity and honesty that characterized his performances. Jimmy didn't hate easily, but when he did, it was total, observed a director who worked with him in the 1950s. But what people miss is that his strongest hatreds weren't about personal slights. They were about violations of his core principles, about how this business and and the people in it should conduct themselves. This perspective helps explain why Cagney, despite these intense animosities, maintained a reputation for professionalism throughout his career. His conflicts weren't petty or capricious, but rooted in deeply held convictions about artistic integrity, professional responsibility, and personal authenticity, values he refused to compromise even when it cost him opportunities or relationships. Perhaps most significantly, Cagney's willingness to stand his ground against figures as powerful as Jack Warner or as popular as Clark Gable reflected the same fearlessness that made his performances so compelling. The man who famously said, "Never settle for the status quo," lived that philosophy not just through his innovative acting, but through his refusal to accept treatment, conditions, or relationships he considered beneath his standards. As we reflect on these legendary feuds, we gain insight not just into Hollywood's hidden history, but into the complex character of a man whose on-screen intensity was matched by equally powerful off-screen convictions. James Cagney's hatreds, like his performances, were never casual or half-hearted. They were full-throttle expressions of a personality that accepted nothing less than complete commitment to whatever he believed. If you found this exploration of Hollywood's hidden conflicts enlightening, please hit that like button and subscribe for more glimpses behind entertainment history's carefully constructed facades. We'd love to hear in the comments which revelation surprised you most, or which other Hollywood legends you'd like us to investigate in future videos. Until next time, remember that the most compelling dramas in Hollywood often unfold not on screen, but behind it. And sometimes, understanding the private battles of our cultural icons helps us better appreciate the authentic passion they brought to the performances that continue to electrify us decades later.